Welcome to this week's Who the Folk podcast. I'm Lonnie Goldsmith, the editor of TC Jewfolk. This week I sit down with John Kuhl, a Hopkins School Board member who is running for Mayor of Minnetonka this fall. We talk about what got him into local politics, why change focus to the city, and his recent conversion to Judaism on this week's Who the Folk podcast. John Kuhl, welcome to the Who the Folk podcast. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for inviting me.
So you are currently a Hopkins School Board member.
Yes.
And you are running to be mayor of the city of Minnetonka in the fall.
I am, yeah. I had to really decide if I was going to run for another term at school board or throw my hat in the ring in something else. And I really decided that I was going to go for mayor of Minnetonka.
So the terms, it wouldn't be an overlap if you lost, if you wouldn't have the fallback of Hopkins.
Exactly.
Okay.
Right. So it was a real decision that had to be made. And I think that really shows how committed I am to really winning this office.
So let's talk about the current spot you're in first. I'm always curious. I love talking to people who are on school boards and on city councils, really especially at the local sort of suburban level, just to sort of get a feel for what it is that brought them into politics in the first place. So for you, what was it that brought you into particularly school board politics?
Right. I would say the word politics has always scared me and made me want to go the other way.
Okay.
Like, truthfully. It was, COVID really created the opportunity for me, which
really?
Is odd, right?
Yeah.
That something positive came out of COVID.
Not a lot of opportunities.
Right. So historically, I am always traveling probably 4 months out of the year for my job. COVID changed that. Okay. And also through that, I've been able to kind of grow a group of individuals that are going to take that over for me if travel opens up in the future. So I really had the opportunity to throw my hat in the ring when a post came up during COVID for school board. Because someone that had been on the school board was elected to be Hennepin County Commissioner. His name's Chris Latondras. And so he still had time left in his term. And so there was, I think, 14 people that went through an interview process and kind of a voting period with the board members themselves. And I won that. And I think the push that made me throw my hat in the ring there was all of the financial concerns that were really surrounding Hopkins schools and all school districts. Because we knew that we had about at least 1.5 and possibly up to $3 million of a deficit that we were going to have to cut to be able to make this upcoming school year and beyond doable. And so because of my financial background, because of my ability to deal with grief, I threw my hat in the ring even more than just because of social issues. I threw my hat in the ring because I wanted to be a part of those financial decisions. So
what is your day job? Because that's the other thing that a lot of people may not know, especially at this level. This is a part-time, there's a stipend for council members, mayors that, I'm sure amounts to something in the neighborhood of a couple bucks an hour, maybe, for the amount of work you put in.
Probably 50 cents at the school board level.
Yes.
So I represent companies that sell to Target stores.
Oh, okay.
So I work for a local Minnetonka-based company owned by a Jewish family, the Moscows.
Okay.
And it's a third-generation business. I've worked there for 16 years now.
Wow. Okay.
And I love it. It's I really feel like an extended part of their family, and it's the best. It's the best experience that I've ever had in any type of career move that I've made. Awesome company.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So, it's interesting. There's been a lot made recently about the stresses that have been put on school board members and school boards because of COVID, and obviously then board members at districts around the metro area, and I'm sure around the country. You think, extrapolate it out.
Absolutely.
But were you, I guess, first of all, are those concerns understated, or are they much worse than I think people maybe know about?
I think it depends on the school district and really the group of professional administrators that are kind of the superintendent and that person's team. I think it has a lot to do with that piece because, quite honestly, we're very fortunate in Hopkins. Now, I'm very biased, but in Hopkins we have a very strong superintendent, Dr. Mary Prairie Reed, and she has a group of people around her that are, I mean, the best in the business is not even a good enough term to say. So it has been, for me, very stressful because of, yes, the feedback is real. There are parent frustrations. There are challenges with the state government, and let's not even talk about the federal government challenges. But when you get to then work with those individuals that are the lifelong administrators of the district, for me, that has made life a lot easier. But the interactions with the teachers when we have to make budget cuts, or the any type of professional staff, and the parents, those can be very tough conversations because we are all wanting the best for our children, and it is difficult when budgets are not growing and we have to figure out what to prioritize. Parents get very angry when a service that you've had is going away or is going to look different. True story. I felt it myself, but I think that's what school boards around the country are dealing with.
And as a parent of two school-age kids, like I am, you understand that frustration, right? It's a very logical concern,
right,
the parents have.
Right.
That feedback you're getting comes from a place of, and that frustration from a place of caring.
Absolutely. And we've all done it. We've all gone up to somebody and have said, I don't want to be that parent, but, right? So, and
I have
that's
started
real.
a fair few conversations that way, yes.
Right. And so I think we all are challenged with that, right?
Yeah.
And especially when you are, when you have committed to a school district when your kids were in kindergarten, and especially if you have more than one child, and things that maybe your oldest child experienced one way, your youngest child may have a change in either what's offered or how something, a program is going to look. And that's difficult because, of course, you want to give all of your children the best opportunities. And I think that's where it can be tough to be a school board member because you really want to address somebody's concern, but oftentimes the conversation that has to happen is I understand where you, Joe parent, is coming from, and this is why I made the decision that I made, because not as often as we would like can we fix the concern that they have. They have a concern because something has been changed or there's going to be an issue that can't be resolved without making a change. And that's tough. But I think where what kind of makes a difference between the school boards that are very proactive and those that are very reactive is when the board members are willing and put themselves out there to have residents come to them even when they're angry or especially when they're confused, because communication, we can always think that we've done a great job communicating anything. Communication is tough.
Oh yeah, absolutely. All right, so switching gears, you've decided Minnetonka mayoral race. City politics and school politics, again, I'm using the P word, sorry, but they are very different. They're very different things.
Right.
At least in my experience of covering them and being around the people who are involved. Why decide to make this move now from one sort of entity to another?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And quite honestly, it is probably the hardest thing to explain, because it was more of a feeling that I needed to do something. So let me give you a little bit of the background. One of the things that the Hopkins School District does very well is they engage, and especially they engage with their underserved communities. And that could be defined and is defined as, the Somali community or the African American community, or by economics. And during COVID especially, there was a lot of Zoom calls.
Yeah.
An enormous amount. As a newer member, I found myself being on so many of those calls because I wanted to get my feet wet. I really want to understand all the impact that one decision has on families. Well, as I listened to all of these calls, I heard so many families of people that lived in Minnetonka and those that didn't live in Minnetonka, the experiences that they have had going in and out of Minnetonka, bringing their children to school, or moving to Minnetonka, or trying to find a home in Minnetonka, or trying to find employment in Minnetonka.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, you start to feel themes of comments coming your way. And as I put all of these themes together in my brain, there's two things that kind of jumped out at me, was that engagement and accessibility, especially in the mayoral position. And my vision that is slightly different, or is vastly, in my opinion, is vastly different than where things are now, is I think Minnetonka needs to have a mayor that is very focused on engagement, which is proactively going out and talking to all parts of Minnetonka, and not just residents, but maybe even more importantly, those individuals that travel in and out of Minnetonka on a daily basis for work, school, worship, whatever it may be. Because quite honestly, the effects that that has on people is real.
Yeah.
And if the last 6 months for all of us that live in Minnesota, we have seen that issues that can happen to people that aren't necessarily residents of your city can really change the outlook of a city.
Right.
And I'm referring to Brooklyn Center and Minneapolis.
Yep.
The more proactive that we can be with engagement is very important. But then also accessibility. Accessibility is not just making yourself available when somebody calls with a complaint, but it's also being available at every event that is possible. And I would say one of the greatest examples that I have for a Twin Cities mayor is a young man by the name of Shep Harris. And I would say, and you're welcome for calling you young, Shep. I would say that he epitomizes the vision that I have for what the mayor of Minnetonka needs to look like as far as engagement and accessibility, and then also transparency of what exactly is happening.
Yeah.
That's where it started for me.
Okay.
And then it has grown to all of these different topics that are important to all of us: diversity, equity, inclusion, parks, housing, all of those things. But it all is rooted back into those three first things: engagement, accessibility, and transparency.
I like that you mentioned equity, which the number of groups that I'm engage in on Facebook who mistake equity and equality,
Right.
Aren't the same thing.
Right.
Not necessarily meant to be the same thing.
Exactly.
They can be, but they're different. They mean different things. I think it's important to have that sort of focus. Now, are you is the sitting mayor running for re-election?
He is.
Ah.
He is, and he is a very nice man.
Yeah.
He absolutely is, and he has been on the city council for 16 years, and he's had one full term as mayor, and this would be his second term.
Okay.
And our it is a nonpartisan race, which
Right.
is great. That's what I love about city politics.
Yep.
We both lean different ways,
Sure.
as far as what our political affiliations would be, and I think that's good. I think that's a great thing for this election, because there is not just two people that are running that kind of stand for the same thing. We both have things that make us different from one another.
Right.
And I think that's very good. And it's not just, we need new blood in the mayorship.
Right.
That I think that's an excuse sometimes to remove people from office.
And that's like a soundbite answer that
Exactly.
you give. Like, that's not an answer that means anything.
Exactly. I think what's more important is that the way that I think about it is that our future in Minnetonka doesn't have to be the past.
Right.
Right. And I think, that's a soundbite.
Yes.
Right. If there's a concern about somebody that has, been kind of pushing the same strategy for 20 years, that's great.
Yeah.
So that's when we take a look at what I look like, what I want to see for the future. It is different than the last 20 years.
Right.
Some, great.
Right.
Economically, we are a very fiscally responsible city,
Mm-hmm.
and I follow that 100%. Anybody that sees how I interact on the school board knows that I am fiscally responsible times 80. And I think that's important. It's real.
Back to the old adage of all politics are local.
Right. And I think that one of the differences that I may not fit into that form perfectly is that I lay out my vision very clearly.
Mm-hmm.
I don't hide it.
Yeah.
And it is a very nonpartisan approach,
Yeah.
which is good. But unlike others that are and have run for my race in the past, where their vision is not listed anywhere on paper, it's just all about what they've done in the past.
Right.
That's where we don't see eye to eye.
Right.
I think it's important for people to know exactly what my feeling is on cutting down big old trees.
Yeah.
I'm not a huge fan of it, but if we do it, we need to do it responsibly, and we need to plant more than one small sapling
Right.
somewhere else in the city. So
Right.
I think there's importance to being straight up and let people know what your thoughts are,
Yeah.
so they know, and then let the best person win.
So when does the filing deadline open for this race?
Today.
Oh, as we are speaking, obviously you'll hear this a few days from now, but
Right.
so the filing is open.
Right.
So there could has anyone else declared besides you and the sitting mayor?
No.
Okay.
And we are on, if there would be, we are one of those cities that are part of the ranked choice voting.
Ah, that's right.
So-
I remember that Minnetonka just
Yeah.
just went to that.
Very controversial. So that is something that, quite honestly, I haven't really 100% understood until I've started to run the race and
Yeah.
knowing that there is an opportunity or a chance that somebody else may file. And so I've learned so much about it. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's I know when I lived in Minneapolis years ago, I was there for one election right when they started the ranked choice voting.
Okay.
And to this day, I don't know exactly who I voted for or why. And I remember it was a very big election, and I'm sure if I could go back in time, I'm sure I did it all wrong.
Well, look, fortunately now there's some. I remember seeing this because I was trying to get not that I vote in Minneapolis, but for the 2017 election, was trying to get a feel for how that worked. And somebody had I think it might have been the city elections department, put together a really good sort of graphic video of how it looks and where your vote goes after,
Right.
and all the permutations of who you put first and who you put second and how
Right.
that all works. So I think it's great. I think it's great that more cities go to it. I do think it's important to be able to help build a consensus, victor in a race.
Well, and it also evens the playing field. Because one of the things that nonpartisan races do, it really makes it easy for wealthy white men to run. And what ranked choice voting does is it really allows really individuals of any background to be able to be a part of that final vote and not have to go through a very, which can be expensive, primary where very few people vote. And that's not necessarily a fair way to figure out who should go to the final vote.
Right.
So there's benefits in it, especially when you're looking at a city that is transitioning every year. All of these first and second ring suburbs are changing every year.
Yeah.
The makeup of them, the the cost of living in Minnetonka is not going down.
Nope.
It's going way, way up, same as all the cities around us, as you know personally.
Yep.
And so leveling the playing field is not a bad thing.
No. And like, the other thing I think a lot of people don't realize is that it's really expensive to run an election. And when you have to run an election, you have to run a primary to get from 3 to 2.
Right.
That's a lot of, to do that in September and then turn around and run it again in the general from, those top 2 who are probably the two obvious there's usually 2 favorites and then one guy who just wants to see his name on a ballot or a woman who just wants to see her name on a ballot.
Right.
It's expensive. It costs the city a lot of money just to whittle it down.
Right.
And now you don't have to do that.
And it's, there's cost to however you do an election. But I
Yes.
think the good thing is that I think it's going to start training us as Minnesotans that there are opportunities out there and, individuals that want to, have that. You had talked about how the stipends aren't huge for these. This
Yes.
isn't a full-time job.
Right.
But it does give opportunities for those individuals that, want to have, a little income. That's, it's great for individuals that may not have a full-time job or that, like me, want to do so much in their day that they never get to think, I guess. So that's a true story too.
I think the other thing part of what you said though is that it increases hopefully the diversity of the candidates
Absolutely.
that come out, and it brings new and younger and more diverse voices into the conversation, which certainly speaking of my own suburb, we don't have very much diversity.
Right.
I mean, I guess maybe one of the city council members is a female, but the rest are all white men.
Okay.
To go with the white woman. And it's, it's not great. I think it sort of leads to groupthink, and you don't have somebody who can provide any sort of diverse viewpoint.
Right. And I think Minnetonka is benefited because we've had 3 or 4 new people that have joined the board over the last 2 years.
Oh, that's good.
And I would say, one being the first African American elected, to my knowledge, in the city, but
that's
definitely
great.
the first female African American woman. She's fantastic.
Yeah.
And 2 younger, I say younger, but they're probably 45 or 50, just like me, but younger men. And,
Okay.
and it's fun because, they're asking a lot of questions that they want the future to be not just what the past was, but also they want to make sure that the questions that they are asking are heard and that the city staff answers them right or wrong, just so they can decide what the future is going to be.
And diversity in age is also important. I know it's not necessarily what people think of when you talk about diversity in a candidate pool, but it is important because, again, you do have, when you have largely, 60 or 70 somethings making the decision because they've been in these positions for many, many years and they've lived in the city for, the last 30 years, they may not, it becomes hard to see the more maybe recent examples of ways that things are changing and the way maybe their thinking needs to evolve also.
Right. Well, I think there's just so many conversations that are happening that I think that any city council or any school board benefits from people with different backgrounds.
Yeah.
And those backgrounds definitely are race, religion, age, sexual orientation. And I think you can even throw in there how long have they lived in a city.
Yeah.
You know, I think for Minnetonka specifically, I think it is not always easy if you haven't lived in the city for a long time to get elected.
Yeah.
And, you know, I often get the first question out of somebody's mouth is, how long have you lived in Minnetonka? It's almost like...
It's such a Minnesota question.
Yeah, it's like, are you going to pass the smell test or not? And we've lived here for 6.5 years, I think is the exact time.
Okay.
And we love Minnetonka.
Yeah.
It's quite honestly, every aspect of my life is Minnetonka now, from my work to my kids' schools to where we worship to where we do everything. I mean, it is, you know, our lives have gotten to the point where if we have to go outside of Minnetonka, usually we're like, oh, we got to go outside of Minnetonka. This is going to be a big night. So, you know, and I guess that's the reality.
Right. So one of the other interesting things, so your wife Michelle gave us the heads up that you were running and that we should interview you. So hi Michelle, thank you. She had mentioned about, which I was very interested in, you know, totally thrilled with being able to do anyway. She mentioned that you had recently converted.
I did.
So, another area that interests me is, besides why people run for office, is, you know, being somebody, you know, born and raised Jewish, I'm always interested in why people want to convert and join the fold. So I guess for you, what was, you know, why now, I guess is your kids are older, you've been married for quite a while now, so why now?
It's a great question. I think, you know, I started my conversion process 5.5 years ago.
Okay.
And for any of those that you have converted, I took the long route. So I will tell you that the reasons for converting are so, there's been so many different parts of my life where it's been, in the last 5 years, there's been kind of different influences and different mindsets that have kept me going.
Okay.
And so starting probably 4.5 years ago, I had the ability to be able to complete my my process.
Okay.
But I didn't specifically because I felt like my faith and my heart wasn't there yet. And it was about the time that COVID started is when I was ready to make the transition to convert. I had some challenges through COVID, especially with my health. I had a blood clot due to COVID.
Okay.
That initially we thought was a heart attack, but now we know it was a COVID-related blood clot.
Okay.
And with that and several other pieces of the COVID experience, it really confirmed in my mind and my heart that that I was ready to join the Jewish community really full time.
Okay.
Because quite honestly, being married to my wife for 15, 16 years at the time.
So get that number right.
Right. Well, you know, I'm not going to go into detail, but it was at least 16 years from that date.
Okay.
See,
okay.
I'm putting it at that date,
There you
so
go.
I don't need to. Yeah.
That's
okay.
all right.
So
good get out of jail.
Yeah. I know. I'm sorry. So I had thought about it for so long that you know I wasn't going to do it because of an expectation of my wife or her family.
Okay.
And you know, growing up in a devout Catholic family, you know, those are tough conversations.
Yeah.
And it's honestly conversations now that I'm at the point in my life that my religion is very private to me, that I don't feel the need to have conversations with my family or friends. I'm more than happy for them to come and ask me questions, but I don't feel I need to go to them and give them updates. And that was a big turning point for me, where I started to embrace the fact that I'm doing stuff for me, and I don't need anybody else's approval.
Yeah, and I think that's great. And, and the reason I asked the question, mostly you hear so often of people who convert when they get engaged, so right before they get married.
Right.
Or before they have kids, or before bar mitzvah. Like, there are certain, it's like the life cycle type moments that is sort of the kick in the ass that somebody needs to follow through on it. And
I did it the exact opposite, right? I've already had a daughter go through bat mitzvah.
Yeah.
And, and I when I talked to her about it, I was like, I know that I was not converted when you had a bat mitzvah. Are you going to be frustrated if I am when my son gets bar mitzvah in 3 years? She was like, no, I don't care. And and that was good. It's like, when you're
spoken
trying,
like a teen.
Exactly. When you're trying to make sure that all the stars are aligned, that you're making the right decision for yourself, it did. And some of those conversations I thought were going to be really hard conversations, and they weren't. And that was a good thing for me. Talking to my father-in-law and mother-in-law about it, that was a big moment for me, because I had kind of gone dark on, where am I in the process, right? They knew that I had gone to classes, ages ago, back when there was a totally different president, even the one before our last one, right? So it was nice to then be able to give an update to everybody, like right before I kind of went to the mikvah.
Okay.
So it was nice, and I had to wait probably 6 months for that mikvah process and all of those pieces, just because of COVID and and there is there is a certain amount of anticipation that was good then.
Yeah.
I had something to really look forward to, and it gave me more time to really have not just I want to be considered like part of a Jewish family. It was, and I see this more with people that convert, is that I want to have my own Jewish identity, and I really put that way up there on the list, which not everyone that I interact with that were born Jewish have that same priority. So they live a Jewish lifestyle, and they're Jewish, and I wanted to put more of that religious piece into it that I had, quite honestly, growing up right next to a Catholic church. So, I had,
pretty different.
A little different, right? And so, but I had that commitment where, like, probably 4 times a week I was an altar boy.
Wow.
And so I wanted to have some of that same maybe tradition or Catholic guilt. You don't get that as much in the Jewish faith, and I was, kind of. My mom's not Jewish.
Hang on.
So, but I wasn't. I just didn't experience that as much, right? So I was wanting, I was trying to figure out where I fit. Yeah. And quite honestly, Rabbi Aaron Weininger, who is, for me, one of the most important people in my life, really was able to help me through the process in a way that was so personal and so authentic to who I was and authentic to who he was, which was good.
It's very good. And I didn't really appreciate the idea that you wanted to do it. Again, I want to say do it for the right reasons. That feels a little trite, because like, your reasons are your reason.
Right.
Like, who am I to say? But you wanted to do it for a reason. Like, you wanted to find a personal hook, not just out of an expectation or obligation, because when you started, you had a 12-year-old, so it's not like you had been parenting a Jewish kid for a long time at that point, 2 Jewish kids at that point, so it's like, find the reason, find the inspiration that wants to bring you to the table.
Exactly. And and during that whole time, we were doing Friday night dinners, going to synagogue a lot.
Yeah.
Probably not enough, but going a lot.
And far be it from me to judge, trust me.
and most importantly, I think my wife always thought of me as as Jewish in some ways.
Yeah.
But I wasn't. I didn't think of myself that way. And
Right.
so it's nice now to be able to complete that picture for myself.
Right.
To where we are like a Jewish family, and I'm starting to try to take back some of that, some of those rituals
Yeah.
that has always fallen on my father-in-law, and and trying to get experience enough to where I can do it in Hebrew to be able to take some of those back.
Yeah.
And sometimes I have a problem with English, so Hebrew's been very difficult for me, and so it's been fun in that way because I want to take over some of those things. So I have. I have every cheater book that you can think of that makes it easier, and I still have my own way of saying words that,
Sure.
I think I get corrected more in 2 words than I probably ever have corrected my daughter. But it's good.
Yeah.
It's good for me.
Well, that's great.
Yeah. So it's fun to make that transition,
Yeah.
and it just happened to be right along the same time where I jumped in the deep end when it came to other choices, specifically running for mayor.
Yeah.
So,
Well, excellent. Well, last 2 questions we have for you, and then we'll let you get back to your day. I don't know whether it's work time or campaign time for
Work
you.
time.
But
Work
time.
time's still-
We're going to let
still
you get
going,
back to that. What is your favorite Jewish holiday?
it has to be because of my children. I would say, and it's got to be Hanukkah
Okay.
because of the joy of my son.
Yeah.
He has it's a time that we're able to spend together that is so different than my experiences growing up, and love all the Jewish holidays because so many of them are his first experiences, especially being kind of moving toward that bar mitzvah date.
Yeah.
Going to be 10 in 12 days, so or 14 days. So he he's starting to see everything much bigger.
Yeah.
Much bigger eyes. So
And I also think not growing up Jewish, you sort of see the holidays more through your kids' eyes and how they experience them rather than because you don't have the comparable experience at the same age.
exactly.
Interesting.
Trust me, I love Santa Claus, but there's there's something different about
Yes.
the anticipation and the conversation
Right.
that that lighting the menorah gives, especially for my children.
Yeah.
And we have so many menorahs that we almost light the house on fire every year, so it's fun. So.
Well, fun. I don't know that, but I mean, the lighting the house on fire part, maybe that part.
Right.
Not so
Yeah.
fun.
We have a fire extinguisher.
Well, that's
it's okay.
good, as long as it's nearby. And what is your favorite Jewish food?
Oh, potato latkes, hands down.
Yeah.
Potato latkes, and I don't even. I mean, I don't even consider potato latkes in my mind as being a Jewish food because my mom made a version of them as well.
Right.
So I would say Kuhl is up there.
Oh yeah.
Because
That's a good one, too.
my mother-in-law makes it with more sugar than than is probably traditionally mandated, and so it's
certainly more sugar than is healthy.
exactly. So it's like dessert for dinner.
Nice.
You can never go wrong.
That's always good. Well, John Kuhl, thank you so much for the time. We appreciate getting to meet you, and best of luck with your campaign as we start to inch into campaign season.
Thank you very much. It was great to talk to you.
If you're running for office this fall and we haven't had you on Who the Folk yet, please shoot me an email at editor@tcjufolk.com and we'll set up time to talk on a future episode. The Who the Folk podcast is part of the Jewfolk Podcast Network, a product of Jewfolk Inc. Please subscribe, rate, and review the show wherever you get your podcasts. If you have suggestions for other podcast guests, please email them to me at editor@tcjufolk.com. For our other shows, check out tcjufolk.com/podcast.